Hello and welcome to Ecoholics Thinking Tree Talk Show. In this talk show, we have a very special guest, Professor Vishwanath Pingai. He is currently teaching at IIM Ahmedabad, Professor of Economics. So we both share a common love for economics and cricket. So I thought it's a nice platform to discuss about economics of cricket. So welcome, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So, sir, my first question is to understand cricket as an ecosystem, because if we see India won the World Cup in 1983, where with very small or very limited resources. But when we won in 2011, the story was very different. Advent of IPL, dominance of Indian cricket in the last decade, in the current decade, the scenario changed drastically. If we break down the ecosystem of cricket, what surrounds? So what do you think? Like, if we break down the ecosystem, economics ecosystem surrounding cricket in India, how do you see this?
Oh, it's an interesting question. Let's actually understand what a market is, first of all. Market is where, there are certain players, no pun intended here, and I don't mean players really as the 22 players on the field,
Yes.
right? But I mean all the economic agents. They get to interact with each other and certain transactions happen. That's what market is. So if you were to unpack the cricket ecosystem, as you call it, I think it's almost kind of a very naive assumption to assume that cricket is just about, two teams playing with each other and a few spectators in the ground, and then there is a collection of revenues at the gate and all that stuff. First of all, in terms of the overall ecosystem, you have players. You have a lot of support staff. We can't dispute that. You have the entire construction of a massive infrastructure called a stadium. Cricket stadium is not exactly a small piece of ground in somebody's backyard. It requires a lot of planning, it requires a lot of work, and in fact, actually the way infrastructure is planned has a direct outcome on the matches at the end of the day. Spectator facilities need to be planned. That's one side of it, which is physical infrastructure. Now there's another side of an infrastructure that opens up. This is pure advertisement, TV rights, advertisement space. Each minute goes for tons and tons of money. Certain players command certain premium in this particular case, so on and so forth. That's another side. And the new emerging side of it is a digital platform side of it, where you actually do OTT.
Yes.
And in an OTT market, the ad you see, Sanat, is very different from the ad that I see. The ad that I get to see is very differently curated for my taste, based on my habits, and for you, the ads that you see are based on the content that you have, you've been exposing yourself to, as far as the broadcaster is concerned. Now, there are bidding rights associated with it. There are facilities associated with it. Now, if you think about it, there's another side of it as well called technology. With each passing day, you have it started very crude way of verifying runouts. Way back in 1992, when Sachin Tendulkar was first time adjudged run out using a third umpire, right? From there onwards, the technology involvement in the game. I'm not talking about, broadcasting improvements itself. I'm even talking about, in general, technology surrounding the match itself.
Yes.
So there is, if you talk about the cricket as an ecosystem, players, spectators, television broadcasters, game equipment manufacturers, now with IPL coming in, entertainment.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know, it may be a very controversial topic to make, but cricket, I would argue, the Test cricket and the one-day internationals compete with other sports. But I would actually argue that IPL competes with entertainment.
Yes.
I mean, when a one-day international, when the recently concluded 2023 World Cup happened, albeit with a heartbreak for most of Indians, I think watching cricket. But just recently concluded IPL. Are we watching cricket, or are we watching? I mean, are we thinking about movie dekhna hai aaj ya IPL dekhna hai? So cricket's metamorphosis into this is where product differentiation comes up, right? I mean, the same company launches multiple products. So therefore, to me, I look at IPL's emergence as an entire strategy of a different thing coming out. It has its own rules. It has its own pricing strategy. think about it. It's not one ecosystem as you call it. It is several ecosystems, often having some kind of connection, deep connection in some place, tangential connection in some place. 1983, people thought about one-day cricket the way we are talking about IPL today.
Yes.
Few years down the line, I wouldn't be too surprised if the entire ecosystem is built around IPL, with test cricket becoming an entertainment sustained over a period of time. I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult to foresee how cricket will metamorphosize itself in the coming days. So therefore, it's not just an ecosystem, it is ecosystems. But the fundamental idea of economics, namely microeconomics more specifically,
Yes.
product differentiation, platform economics, which is becoming very clear nowadays, all these are playing a huge role. And I think that's the important thing to realize if one were to unpack the economics of cricket.
Exactly, because we have seen in IPL, every match is a thriller. So people are replacing their serials in the night time.
Interesting question, interesting comment you make. Every match is a thriller.
Yes.
Very interesting comment.
So it's like it's possible in only in T20s, not in Test match. Although, like you said, in '83, it was one day international when we saw floodlights, first time, color uniform.
1983, there was no color uniform or floodlights. It was
After
1985. 1985 Champions Trophy in Australia is when color uniform and floodlights started.
1992 World Cup was the first time when we did that. So that's entertainment gradually. Now we are seeing T10 series as well in Canada, if you've heard about this. 10 overs cricket. So everyone
hundreds in England.
Hundreds in
These
England.
are very interesting innovations.
So if we talk about the fan base, in the first answer, I saw the fan base plays a very important role. If I take you the data, when I saw qualifier one, it was approximately on Geo Cinema, people were watching 7 CR. But second last match of league, that was CSK versus RCB. People were like almost 42 crore people were watching Virat Kohli versus MS Dhoni. If you compare this data with semi-final of India, New Zealand, India, Australia Cricket World Cup final, somewhere around 5 CR to 6 CR. How do you see the value of these people above than the league, above than maybe their team, the fan base? How do you see economics of brand value of cricketers?
Tough question. In a national team, there's no individual player because, the player's identity is subsumed by the national identity in every sense of the word. Whereas in an IPL, it is the player's gravitas that comes to the fore because, both MS Dhoni and Gautam Gambhir belong to the same country and they've won the World Cup together. And today they're playing in two different camps. Gautam Gambhir coaching, I understand that. But, you get the drift of where I'm going with it. Virat Kohli and MS Dhoni, they won the World Cup together. Virat Kohli and MS Dhoni are competitors with each other. Now the point is, we'll have to also understand this dynamic a little bit more. IPL, when Cricket World Cup is going on, as I said, this is cricket. So chances are we are actually seeing a lot more people in World Cup than you're seeing in IPL. But then what you gave me statistics of fans that are watching, these are digitals.
Yes.
Now the way digital OTT platforms, you're talking about Geo Cinema numbers that they display in terms of the number of watchers. Oh well, that's misleading. That's not total number of watchers. These are only digital.
Digital.
So therefore, I will not agree with you that India, Australia on Hotstar, I agree, had lesser viewers than Geo Cinema did. Let's also understand one thing. This is very, very important for us to make a sense of the numbers, and I'll come to the fan base and fan mania a little later. First of all, that I think there's a different way of looking at these numbers. Geo Cinema is free. Hotstar you had to pay. So many people were gathering in front of their Tata Skies and Airtels and maybe even the local cable TV of the world in order to watch World Cup. Whereas for Geo, everyone's hooking onto their mobile phones to watch. Make sense? So the operating word here is that Geo Cinema is free. It was a question in one of my midterms I asked, why is Geo Cinema free? Answer is very clear. The more number of people watch Geo Cinema, the more the advertising space, to use technical jargon, becomes inelastic. So
Yes.
therefore, the per minute revenue that you get for advertising space just kind of shoots through everything you can imagine. So therefore, your cinema is absolutely free for you, but it is very, very profitable. But
Exactly.
first of all, don't compare the numbers of 42 crores with 4 crores. I am sure the World Cup is watched by a lot more people than this
Because on television there are
on
like
television.
10,
I think
20
World Cup
people
was
watching
dominated
at
by
one time.
television. And
And
IPL is dominated entirely because people were watching on their mobile phones. You're
exactly.
going on a train journey, you're watching IPL, much to the dismay of your neighboring passenger, by the way, but that's a different story. But this is what it is. I mean, I don't know how many times I logged in to Geo Cinema on 5 accounts, on 2 accounts at the same time. My son is watching on the TV. I'm on the road and I'm watching it on this. I don't think I watched a single India match in the World Cup except in my home because whatever happened, I made sure that I sat at home and watched it, right? So therefore, the numbers are very, very misleading in that sense. Now let's come to the fan base. I mean, obviously, the World Cup was probably the biggest watched event, and if not in the history of sport, at least in the history of Indian sport. I think I have no doubt about it. What makes IPL so interesting?
Yep.
You know that there's always this comparison between players, whether you like it or not. We still debate whether it is Gautam Gambhir's innings that made a difference in 2011 World Cup or MS Dhoni. One would even argue, who contributed more? Right? One would even argue that the Kohli innings of 30 something in the
Yes.
World Cup is probably the most crucial because he kept the Moradins, Malinga at bay. And there are arguments like that.
It's a
MS
team
Dhoni
game.
stole all the limelight, and we agree with you. And I became a die-hard fan of MS Dhoni on that day. I mean, there's no question about it, and still am. My son's 9 months old, and was 9 months old when India won the World Cup. But today he adores Dhoni like crazy because he saw the video of himself watching MS Dhoni when he was 9 months old. But the point is, who is better? Who is the greater servant of Indian cricket, MS Dhoni or Virat Kohli? This is a question you never get to answer under any circumstances. You
What I
always
feel as a
whether Sachin Tendulkar is better or Brian Lara is better. But you'll never get to know whether Sachin Tendulkar is better or Rahul Dravid is better. And suddenly, IPL provides you that medium. You know whether Virat Kohli is better or Bumrah is better. Bumrah is a better bowler or Virat Kohli is better batsman.
yes.
Akshar Patel is a better bowler. So this comparison is the product differentiation that IPL brings to the table when compared to regular international cricket.
Yes. Because otherwise they would have faced each other in nets.
One thing that happened in 1983 World Cup, I'll tell you very categorically. The first class cricket that used to provide these comparisons to you broke down because international players very gradually moved away from the first class cricket. International players don't play much first class cricket unless you're a Chattisgarh Pujara who's desperately trying to make a comeback into the Indian team.
So that's first class for just only to make a comeback.
Yeah. So first class cricket, which used to provide that, went away. So for almost 2 decades, almost from let's say 1990s onwards till 2007-8, there's no comparison between Indian players. Who's a better batsman versus who's a better bowler? Today, Bumrah bowls to Virat Kohli. Sometimes Virat Kohli gets out, sometimes he hits it for a 4. So therefore, you have a legitimate basis to compare both these players. And to me, that's the fascination of IPL that has captured our imagination. I would like to make a guess here. I don't know. If IPL metamorphoses itself into one-day cricket, league-based one-day cricket, chances are even that will become extremely popular in India.
Yes. So we have just finished IPL and we have just finished with our Lok Sabha election as well. And now we are in between of our T20 World Cup. So there's a fine line. If we compare economy with cricket, if we say in election, always there's one issue. Every country's election, whatever election it is, as small as big, unemployment is an issue. Now, is that particular issue solved by cricket to some extent?
I mean, that's too much. See, sports in general leads to employment, right? There's no doubt about it. I mean, one of the reasons why Olympics bidding rights are considered so important. I mean, Qatar, for instance, when they hosted Football World Cup, probably employed a few thousand workers. Let's not go into the conditions of those workers, but they provided employment to all these workers. There's zero doubt about it. So therefore, construction of a cricket, so for instance, the current T20 World Cup only, a stadium in New York got built from the scratch, which is behaving very atrociously. That's a different story. But a stadium sprang up almost from nowhere in a land that is obsessed with football and baseball. A cricket stadium came up right in the center of the city. I mean, this is an interesting argument in every sense of the word, right? I mean, then you look at, there are, I was reading one more cricket stadium that came up in Granada, or was it some other place? I don't remember. They just sprang up from thin air in a matter of 6 months. These are all sources of employment, temporary employment, but employment nevertheless.
Temporary spike.
There's definitely a spike. Sports, and then again, let's be very clear, the more cricket gets popular, the more cricket bat manufacturers in Kashmir and a bunch of other places in India and everywhere else will start getting a direct or an indirect employment. There's no doubt about it. Every kid wants to have a Kashmiri willow cricket bat and all that stuff. So that's going to lead to employment, because let's be clear, as we discussed earlier, cricket, for that matter, any sport, is not going to happen without surrounding economic activity, and that economic activity will lead to employment. Will that be to the extent of a perceivable change in the employment statistics that you could directly, grasp and make a statement about? The answer is I don't know. I don't think so. Itna to nahi hai, but I think there's definitely going to be a local spike.
Yes.
In the employment as well. Yeah, so that's, I think, one of the things that I want you to remember. There are other issues that we'll come back to during the talk, but we can continue. That's
one question related to your answer. It's a bit out of the topic, but when we see cricket is more towards eastern side. So we have, like, this time World Cup happening in USA. It's all 8 p.m. IST we are getting. It means 10:30 a.m. they are playing there, and that's a challenge for players as well. If we talk about globalization, why ICC is interested in entering into US, although soccer, popularly known as football throughout the world, but in USA we call soccer. That also tried, like David Beckham, Lionel Messi, they're trying hard to enter into US. How do you see cricket in US in terms of economic angle?
See, I think the hope about cricket in US is the following. If you look at the ethnic groups in the US in terms of who's making more money, it's the Indian diaspora that comes really at the top. I mean, if not the top, somewhere in the top in terms of average salaries. That's a demographic that is not getting captured at this point in time. If you look at the US team, you see a bunch of them of Indian origin. Right? So therefore, there is a particular group in the US that is dedicated to watching cricket. That's the fundamental thing about US. And there's another reason why China and US become prime targets as far as cricket, any sport is concerned. Argument is that there's a lot of money in there, in the sports. Obviously. If you look at American football, probably professionally speaking, the amount of money that's spent on that game is ridiculous, right? I mean, so therefore, if even I can manage a tiny sliver of the pie in China and US, I've made it, economically speaking. Now, why not focus on China? Why focus on the US? The answer is easy to guess. In terms of entry strategy, US already has an Indian diaspora, US already has a Pakistani diaspora, US already has a Caribbean diaspora.
That's nice.
You can't ignore that particular group and not target them. So therefore, you want to target them, and that's where cricket becomes an interesting thing. US becomes an interesting destination for cricket to be there. Honestly, I think the answer is also there. Indian matches seem reasonable spectators in the stadia.
Yesterday, Ireland.
Even if it is with Ireland, you saw enough crowd. In other matches, you're seeing World Cup being played in front of empty stadiums.
Yes.
US has limited capacity, so therefore West Indies has been co-opted, but the prime target is US, as far as I see it.
Exactly, because India-Pakistan happening. Sunday. So that's
All Indian matches are happening in US only, as far as I know. Yeah.
so. If we connect with the concept of barriers to entry, so do you think this is the only barrier in front of ICC to enter into US?
But there's no barrier, right? I mean, the only barrier is infrastructure. Where are they going to get infrastructure? If you look at the real estate prices in New York, San Francisco, San Jose, LA, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, these are the places where Indian diaspora is the highest, right? I mean, it's very concentrated.
Yeah.
It's huge. So therefore, the only entry barrier that I would see is facilities development. And the second entry barrier I see is weather.
Yes.
Weather is a huge deal in the US. Football gets played when it's snowing.
Yes.
यहाँ पे 2 बूंद की वर्षा होती है, you shut the shop and go home. Cricketers are really pampered lot when it comes to sports. I'm sure you'll agree with me. I mean, for heaven's sake, one India-New Zealand match got stopped for a few minutes because, oh my God, it's too sunny. I'm pretty sure you remember the 2003 or 2023 or 2022. I don't remember the exact date, but it's too sunny, and then the match got stopped for a few minutes in the middle. So therefore, there are these kinds of things that are entry barriers. And the second thing is, and the final thing is, the other entry barrier is, this is where network effects come in, right? When most advertisers are clued in on baseball, most spectators are clued in on baseball and football and basketball, and to a certain degree, ice hockey. Does cricket have a space in the larger audience? I mean, if you talk about US population, close to 300 million people.
Yes, exactly.
How many people would you get? And if I put the same effort in India, what is the marginal improvement in my viewer base?
ROI
It's as much an entertainment as an entry barrier question as it is a strategic question as well.
It depends on ROI.
I mean, but if you can make a tiny entry, not too much, at the way things stand, and by chance a public imagination of a regular American is caught with cricket, then of course you see that the money is.
Yeah, exactly, because 35 crores here.
Sanad, I want you to understand one simple thing. It's not just sport. Yes. Pretty much any product today, they want a US entry, period. Yes. Cricket is no exception. That's what I would like to look at, because that's where the money is. That's where the highest GDP is in the world.
The high income country, everyone wants to enter into that. So exactly.
It's not only got money, it also got volumes of people.
But you have explained beautifully the concept of opportunity cost in terms of sports, different sports. They have basketball as well. They have American football, ice hockey. Then they will have cricket as well. Soccer is also promoting heavily. And if we compare FIFA with ICC, so FIFA is far deeper pockets in comparison to ICC. So that's where I feel that cricket has a huge competition to gain attention of even to 40 CR people. And in our initial discussion,
let's be very clear, the American women's football team does spectacular miracles in the women's league.
Yes.
It's one of the top teams in the women's soccer. Right? So cricket, for it to reach there, it'll take a while. I mean, American cricket probably needs a 1983 moment at some point in time.
That's what Indian football is also looking for. Because once we'll get the popularity like Indian hockey got before independence, the same line, that threshold. Moving into the last phase of our discussion, if we talk about microeconomics, so we talk about micro level cricket. When we take, there's a huge popularity of cricket in our country, in subcontinent, but concerns are there when we talk about grassroots cricket, their development, their future, their income level, because people who play India, they are well financially well off to spend their life. Right now, in recent years, we have seen people who played IPL, they are also good. But what about the other people where we can apply some kind of economics model to bridge the gap so that we ensure that talent is coming through the pipeline? What kind of economics angle you see here?
See, I think, again, I don't know, there's no straightforward answer to what you had asked. It's a very interesting argument. Imagine I want to sing. Thank God I don't want to sing, by the way. I should not be singing. But imagine I want to sing. And I want to make a career out of it. Should the government encourage it? I want to play games. Should I government? A simple question to you: should the government encourage running or
Yes.
cricket? Running maybe you'll get a couple of Olympic medals. Cricket at this stage is very uncertain in terms of its Olympic stature and all that stuff. Should I encourage shooting? Should I encourage cricket? Should I encourage singing? Should I encourage fine? So that's a delicate balance that you're talking about. At some point in time, you yourself have made a statement that today IPL players are better off. That means when you compare it with the story 15, 16, 17, 18 years ago, today you have a realistic chance of making a livelihood with cricket. First class cricket, for instance, pays a truckload of money than what it used to a few days ago, a few years ago. When you compare with it, you see that it is a progression with time. You know what? I think progression of a country means that more and more and more people are liberated from the thought of having to worry about where the next meal is coming from. Let's ask ourselves a question. Imagine, at one point in time, cricket in India meant either super rich play or completely bottom of the pyramid play. Super rich because they could afford it, bottom of the pyramid only finds cricket as a way to get out of poverty. Today, you see that the so-called lower middle class and the so-called upper middle class also showing interest in cricket. The answer is very, very clear. It is that the country has more opportunities. So therefore, that I'll turn it around and say that if you want something for the masses, for them to survive, it is the emergence of local leagues, it is the emergence of local tournaments that is going to make a huge difference. Today, volleyball league started. After IPL, volleyball league started. Kabaddi has become not exactly a runaway, run-off sport that I would avoid because there's no money in it. Today, you could make a reasonable living if you're an elite Kabaddi player. 5 years ago, you couldn't have. So this is what I call as the trajectory that you would take. I think I have this idea. I don't know. I've not tested it anyway, but I've spoken to some friends who are clued into sports like me, and we think that in the initial stages, when government gives out grants for sports, only the elite sport sustains, in the sense that either you're a national player or you're a nobody. But as the progress in the country keeps happening, progression in the country keeps happening, as the economy progresses, you're relieved from the tension of day-to-day existence.
Yes.
You're relieved from the tension of day-to-day existence. You keep trying out new things.
Exactly.
So therefore, this is where sport starts penetrating more into grassroots levels. We are a little far from calling ourselves a country where we don't have a care for tomorrow. We are short of tomorrow. We are not yet there, I think. We are getting there. When will we get there is anybody's guess. How will we get there? Anybody's guess. The recently concluded elections filled the hearts of somebody with joy. Some of them felt we moved further away. So that's an individual political affiliation in every sense of the word. But the point is that it remains clearly that as you keep progressing towards economy, as more and more and more people keep saying, I don't worry about my daily bread, I actually can take a half day off and play cricket. Why cricket? I pursue fine arts. If nothing else, I can actually start sketching and I can make a reasonable amount of living out of it. As more and more and more such kind of a mindset keeps coming in, the market will figure out opportunities.
Exactly.
Today you see Karnataka Premier League, you see Tamil Nadu Premier League, you see Andhra Premier League, you see Rajasthan Premier League, and suddenly I was browsing through TV one day. There's something called as tape ball cricket they've started telecasting it. That means somebody is making some amount of livelihood out of it, walking into the pitch without pads and gloves on, just carrying one of those bats that I played with as a kid for fun.
Exactly.
It seems that you don't even need that basic equipment of a pad and a helmet. The rubber ball है यार, कितना लगेगा? I mean, ठीक है, लगेगा तो थोड़ा चोट लगेगा, उससे ज़्यादा नहीं है. So suddenly you see that market is finding novel ways of bringing new kinds of sports into it.
That's a beauty of free.
Sorry?
That's a beauty of free market economy.
That's the Yeah, sports, as long as it is a free market, it's an interesting thing. I mean, at the end of the day. So that's the way I look at it in every sense of the word. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. It was a very nice conversation. I hope we, as an audience, you must have enjoyed. Whatever your connection with the economics with cricket, please tell us in the comment section. Thank you so much, sir, once again for featuring on our Thinking Tree talk show and sharing your love for cricket with economics as a profession.
Thank you very much. Always a nice experience to come and talk. Yeah. Best of luck, Sanat.
Thank you. Have a nice day, sir.
Bye.